Christopher Soto is a queer Latinx poet and activist. His poems are often of a confessional nature and include themes of trauma, intimacy, and identity. Despite his poems being somber and occasionally painful to read, when speaking aloud, Soto is engaging and humorous.
So I just graduated from my MFA at NYU, and she goes, you have to write better than a sandwich. And I was like, what? She's all like, people have a choice to make with their day. They're all like, they could either read your shit or they could eat a sandwich. So I'm gonna try and be better than a sandwich for you.
Born in Los Angeles to El Salvadoran immigrants, Soto saw firsthand the problems with immigration and the treatment of immigrants in America. They consider themselves a prison abolitionist, and they have written many poems surrounding this struggle. This next poem discusses immigration and imprisonment and is titled Self-Portrait as Sonoran Desert.
She walks across my chest, dragging her shadow and fraying all the edges. My nipples bloom into cacti, fruit and flower. She eats, then I do. A needle pricks her. I've only seen this woman cry once, squeezed like a rain cloud. She cried because two white men built a detention center from bone and clay. The first bone, my clavicle, the second, her spine. She howls as the fence surrounds her. She coughs and combs the floor, my chest, shivering. Inside the detention center, she is named immigrant, illegal. She loses 15 pounds and mental health, and her feet are cracked tiles, dirty dishes. This border is not a stitch where nations meet. This border is a wound where nations part.
The poem just read is titled Self-Portrait as Sonoran Desert, and Christopher Soto wrote it around the same time he was working on founding the UndocuPoets campaign, a campaign lobbying poetry publishers to remove the proof of citizenship requirements from contests, allowing undocumented poets to participate. Soto didn't begin their career in activism, though. They moved to New York City and lived in Brooklyn while they wrote confessional poetry surrounding their father and their first love, Rory. As Soto began to be discovered in the poetry community, they started attending writing seminars and workshops with other poets, and their style began to change. Soto said in an interview with Vinyl Poetry and Prose, "I was in a workshop with poets who all write such crafted and intentional and linear poems. I felt too messy and illogical. I was tired of writing over and over and over again the same poems about daddy problems and being traumatized." As Soto became more active with social rights issues, he started writing more poems surrounding his activism and speaking out about it more.
And one of the things that's beautiful, especially being like a non-binary person of color, is we're always like socialized to be smaller, because it's like this concept, like if we shut the fuck up, then we're gonna have some sort of access to power and privilege in publishing and whatever, and we're gonna be part of the community. I'm like, hell no, I'm gonna yell at you, like, because like you're not gonna let me fucking publish anyways. Y'all, it says in your guidelines, so I'm gonna tell you you're fucked up.
Soto's poetry, as they said, is sometimes messy and illogical, but that style adds to the character of their poems. Hearing Soto's poems aloud and reading them are two different experiences, as Soto includes dashes and spacing to create an artistic poem, in a visual sense as well as from a literary perspective. In their poem, Yves Saint Laurent Haute Couture, Soto uses unconventional styles of punctuation and structure as part of their artistic expression. When first looking at the poem, it appears to be random words and phrases interjected with dashes. Soto uses the dashes as spaces and the line staggering as punctuation. In fact, the only actual punctuation in the poem is in the last line, which Soto intentionally put in as a stopping point, and due to the subject matter, they likely wanted it to act as a mic drop moment. Due to the style, the poem read on paper and read aloud have two different effects. When read aloud, certain words and statements seem out of place. Reading it on paper allows more time for the images to speak for themselves, as random as they are. By using this style, Soto can be creative with their wordplay while still conforming with their style of being illogical and unconventional. Instead of lines of poetry stating how the reader should feel or how Soto themselves feels, They allow the words to create images and let the reader create their own emotional responses to the various images. Soto doesn't conform with one style of poetry, though. They have experimented with all sorts of styles, including traditional stanzas and line poetry. Their poem, All the Dead Boys Look Like Me, is an example of Soto writing lines and using standard punctuation. It's also one of their poems addressing a serious issue. They wrote this poem shortly after the shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, where 49 people were killed. Pulse nightclub was an LGBTQ club, and it was Latino night, so Soto felt especially connected to the victims. All the dead boys look like me, for Orlando. Last time I saw myself die is when the police killed Jesse Hernandez, a 17-year-old brown queer who was sleeping in their car. Yesterday, I saw myself die again. 50 times I died in Orlando, and I remember reading Dr. Jose Esteban Munoz before he passed. I was studying at NYU, where he was teaching, where he wrote shit that made me feel like a brown queer survival was possible. But he didn't survive, and now, on the dance floor, in the restroom, on the news, in my chest, there are another 50 bodies that look like mine and are dead. And I have been marching for Black lives and talking about the police brutality against Native communities too for years now. But this morning, I feel it. I really feel it again. How can we imagine ourselves, we being Black, Native, today, brown people, how can we imagine ourselves when all the dead boys look like us? Once, I asked my nephew where he wanted to go to college, what career he would like, as if the whole world was his for the choosing. Once he answered me without fearing tombstones or cages or the hands from a father. The hands of my lover yesterday praised my whole body, made the angels from my lips Ave Maria full of grace. He propped me up like the roof of a cathedral in New York City. Before we opened the news and read about people who think two brown queers cannot build cathedrals, only cemeteries, and each time we kiss, a funeral plot opens. In the bedroom, I accept his kiss, and I lose my reflection. I am tired of writing this poem, but I want to say one last word about yesterday. My father called. I heard him cry for only the second time in my life. He sounded like he loved me. It's something I am rarely able to hear, and I hope, if anything, his sound is what my body remembers first.